Hello, everyone. Just a few days ago, I had a fascinating situation come up related to using your intuition to make decisions. And I knew immediately, I thought, this has to be a podcast episode. Like, we have to talk about using your intuition to make decisions and what gets in the way of that. Partly because I just know generally when I'm talking about something that's real and recent for me, it's going to be better for all of you who are listening as well. And partly because I see what we're going to talk about today is a challenge for a lot of people. And it certainly has been in the past for me and continues to be a journey, which is using my intuition, using your intuition to guide you to make decisions, really small ones and really big ones. So this can be using your intuition for anything from like what you're going to eat for lunch or what you're going to say yes and no to for how you're going to spend your time on the upcoming weekend to like, are you going to say yes or no to a job offer? Are you going to buy that house or not? What are you going to do with these really big decisions and everything in between? So today we're going to dive into how to use your intuition to make decisions, what gets in the way and what to do about those things. Because in my experience, as I've leaned more and more into using my intuition over the last several years, like I said, it has definitely been a journey. Only good things have come out of listening to my intuition and following it. And I will also say the opposite is generally, maybe always true, that when I don't follow my intuition, particularly when I'm like actively going against it, no good comes out of that situation, either in very small ways and in big ways. So first, before we dive into any of that, I want to tell you about this super interesting situation that just came up in my life, like just a couple of days ago, and how it relates to intuition. So a friend and I had planned to take a trip to Scotland at the end of summer, beginning of September. I was very excited about this. We booked a hike. We were going to do the northern half of the West Highland Way, which is like a day-to-day hike where you're hiking all day, but then they take your stuff from B&B to B&B. So you're not carrying all your stuff with you, and you have a warm, dry place to sleep at night and a warm meal and probably a little whiskey as well, since it is Scotland. And that sounds like my perfect vacation, right? So we booked the hiking part of it several months ago. We didn't book anything else, just the hike, because we knew that sold out quickly and we needed to get on that. And it was just last week that we both started to look separately at the logistics. So flights, what were we going to do on the rest of the trip? What were hotels like? And as I started to do this on my own, my flights looked pretty good. They felt solid. But when I was looking at hotels and activities and where else I wanted to go besides doing this hike, it felt hard and it felt expensive. And usually when I'm planning for a trip, I am excited. Like, I love to travel and I love to do the research. And I'm like, oh, I could stay here. I could stay here. Look at all these different activities I could do. And I love it. Like, I love both the research part of it. I love the actual being on the travel. I get really excited about these things, and I wasn't feeling that way. But despite that, nothing was going through my mind that was like, you should cancel this trip. I was just like, oh, this feels harder, and it felt a lot more expensive than I was planning on. Oh, and the other piece was it felt a little overwhelming. I'm not really sure what I was thinking when I agreed to this specific time period, because I have a family trip in July. I'm going to Minnesota in August. And then I was going to go on this trip. And then literally 2 weeks, like exactly 2 weeks after I was supposed to get back, is my anticipated book release date. I don't have an exact date yet because it hasn't gone to the printer, but end of September is the target release date for Grounded Wildness. And like, that's a lot. That's a lot to be out of town for 2 weeks and then come back in 2 weeks later, launch a book. So I was feeling a little overwhelmed about that timing as well. But even still, even with all of these kind of heaviness and hardness and overwhelm, it hadn't crossed my mind to cancel the trip. And then on Saturday, this friend and I went on a hike, And while we were in the car on the way to the trail, she started talking about following your intuition and noticing when things felt like either really right or awry. And I was like, well, like, how is this coming up for you? And she's like, I've been thinking about our Scotland trip. And I could tell she was being super conscientious about how she was bringing this up with me, because I think she didn't want to hurt my feelings. I'm anticipating that, she thought she would probably be really disappointing me if she backed out of this trip. And as she was kind of carefully, but directly bringing this up, just in a compassionate, empathetic way, I looked at her and I was like, my heart wouldn't be broken if we canceled this trip. And she was surprised and shocked. And I don't know all that was going on inside of her, but she was like, are you kidding? Like, really? This is how you feel too? And I hadn't put the words to it until she said it. But as soon as she did, I knew it was the right decision to cancel the trip. I don't think I'd ever done that before, like to have some part of a trip booked and just be like, no, I'm out. I think we need to make a different decision. But we were both having intuitive hits in multiple directions that were saying, this isn't the best decision. Like, let's not do this. Let's not do this. At least not right now, at least not this year. Let's follow our intuition, follow our bodies, and cancel. And the reason I knew that this was a right decision was because as soon as we agreed upon and decided to cancel, I felt relief. I felt absolute relief, like a spaciousness in my body that was like, oh yeah, this is the right decision. And that is always an indicator. It wasn't like my body before was wrapped in knots and telling me, oh my gosh, this is a horrible, horrible, horrible idea. But when I had the option to say, wait, maybe we should reconsider. And then we did, relief followed. Because had I been really wanting to go on that trip, canceling it would have felt disappointing and a little bit of grief and loss, and canceling out on this anticipated really fun experience. And I didn't feel any of that. I felt relief. And we're going to come back to this in a second, this relief piece and like listening to your body as you're following your intuition. But I'm so grateful to this friend that she had the courage to voice what she was feeling. And in that same moment gave me the permission to even have words for what I was feeling, because it wasn't coming forward so strongly for me that I thought, oh, we should just cancel. Partly because I'd never canceled a trip before. I was like, no, once you make a commitment, you're doing the thing. And I'm so glad that she had that courage to bring this forward. And in this situation, we were both aligned, but even if we weren't aligned, it was still a good idea for her to bring that forward. And so this was such an interesting thing, because it was so fascinating that we were both getting these intuitive hits and body hits and all of these signs and signals that we should reconsider the decision we had already made. And she brought it forward. And then I knew immediately it was the right decision as well. Now, I know not everything always with following your intuition ends up like this neatly, right? All we did was lose a little bit of the deposit, not even that much of one on the hike, and everything else was fine, like really easy. We hadn't booked flights, nothing. Sometimes following your intuition is harder. And there's two big reasons that following your intuition gets hard. And I want to talk through both of them and what to do about them. So one is the rules that we are taught, the shoulds and the supposed tos that tell you shouldn't disappoint anyone by following your intuition, by making a different decision, or that you've already made a commitment. You can't go back on it now. You can't say no to that thing because you're going to disappoint someone or you're going to make them unhappy. All of these shoulds and supposed tos are like, you should do the job that your boss wants you to do because that's what you should do. And that's the path laid out in front of you. Even if your intuition is pulling you elsewhere, there can be all of these shoulds and supposed tos piling on top of you that can take you away from your intuition. And I want to give another example that's basically like same topic, but totally different outcome as the Scotland trip that I just talked about. So a couple of years ago, a friend and I were planning to go on a long weekend to Chicago. And in the days leading up to it, we were driving. So this is when I lived in Minneapolis. We were driving, easy trip. We had a cancelable hotel reservation, like would have been really easy to back out. But I felt like, and I was having this feeling of like, it felt overwhelming. I was really busy and it just felt like a lot to do this long weekend, even though Chicago's super fun and all of those things. It just felt like a lot. But I didn't say anything because I didn't want to disappoint my friend. We had made this commitment. We had agreed that we were going to do this. And I mean, clearly it wasn't going to be awful, but, but I was getting this feeling of like, ugh, do I really want to do this? And what was fascinating was that on the trip, we basically co-discovered that she had been feeling the same way. And I'm assuming also didn't bring it up because she didn't want to disappoint me, or maybe she had another reason. I don't know. But the point is, our intuition for both of us was aligned and going in the same direction. And we both ignored it out of the fear of these shoulds, these rules that were piled on top of us telling us, no, like you've already made a commitment. You can't disappoint anyone. You can't do something different. And so we went on the trip and it was fun. It wasn't, it was a fun trip, but we didn't follow our intuition, and we could have, and we would have even been aligned. So this can show up in so many ways. Like you say yes to that job that you've been tapped on the shoulder for, even though your intuition is pulling you elsewhere. You say yes to that party invitation because you don't want to disappoint the hosts, or you say yes to your kid for an activity, even though you're completely busy and you don't really have time and it feels overwhelming to get them to the activity or support them in doing that thing. And everything in you is telling you to say no, but you say yes anyway, because of that should and supposed to and those rules. So when this happens, notice it. Notice if you're feeling a should or supposed to, like your intuition is guiding you in one direction, but the should and the supposed to and those rules are guiding you in a different direction. Stop and notice it. I think this is the most important thing that you can do, is just stop and notice, and then make a conscious decision. I'm not going to tell you what's right or wrong, especially this piece around disappointing people. It's a big fear out there, this fear of disappointing people. And you get to decide what's right and what's wrong for you. But the biggest thing is that I want it to be conscious. I want it to be a conscious decision. So once you bring that awareness to like, okay, is this a rule I'm following? Is this a rule that's there? Can you dig deeper into it and even see if that rule is based in fact? Like if the situation is based in fact, like, are you afraid to disappoint someone when you don't even actually know if you're going to disappoint them or not? Are you making a decision based on a lack of information because you just don't even want to bring up the conversation because it feels scary or it feels hard to have that conversation or to bring that forward? But at the same time, like think of that. If both my friend had not had the courage to bring up this piece around Scotland and feeling like she was pulled in a different direction, we would have gone, because I wasn't feeling it as strongly as her, or wasn't articulating it quite as well as her. We would have gone on that trip. And I mean, again, it would have been fine. It would have been fun. I'm sure there's aspects of it. I was still really excited about the hike. That part I am disappointed about, but the trip on the whole, I'm not disappointed about missing. And we would have spent a good chunk of change on something that neither of us were super, super excited about. And if I'm going to spend that amount of money and time and energy on something, I want to be really excited about it. And if we'd both just assumed that the other person would have been like heartbroken had we not gone on the trip, we would have gone. So dig into those rules and even see if they're real. I mean, what you're feeling is real, but even see if the information that you are assuming is there. Like, are the facts there? And then sometimes you do know. Sometimes you do know, or you have bigger fears than just maybe disappointing someone. Like, let's go back to this example of you've been tapped on the shoulder to take a job at your company, and everyone is telling you you need to do it, that you should do it. And everything in your intuition is saying, I have no interest in this. I don't want to do it. It doesn't feel like the right thing. I like what I'm doing now. I don't want to move to this other thing. Everything in your intuition is telling you to say no, and all the voices around you are telling you to say yes. There might be some real consequences to saying no, depending on your situation. So some of those shoulds that are coming up might be real. They might be real fears like, okay, am I going to limit my future opportunities if I say no to this? Or am I not just going to like disappoint people, but is my bonus going to get impacted? Is my performance review going to get impacted? Is the way that people think of me going to get impacted? And sometimes you can dig into that and, get some more information on whether your fears are founded or not. And even after that, then you can ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth it to go against your intuition, to follow what everyone else is telling you to follow? Is it worth it to avoid the consequences of following your own path, of following your intuition? And I can't tell you the right or wrong answer to that. And it'll probably change depending on the situation. But I think it's really worthwhile to stop and ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth it to say yes to this thing, particularly in big situations, but even in those little ones, like how you're going to spend 2 hours of your life? Are you going to show up to that commitment that you made, those 2 hours full of resentment and overwhelm and exhaustion? Is that worth it or not? And only you get to decide. But this is some of that digging around the rules that I really want you to do when you notice that your intuition is pulling you in one direction and the rules and the shoulds and supposed tos are pulling you in another. Pause. Take that opportunity when you notice the should, when you notice the supposed to, when you notice this divergence between intuition and shoulds, and dive in and make a conscious decision about what to do next. I mean, I'm all for generally breaking the rules that you were handed. So I lean in that direction, but there isn't a right or a wrong for you. The biggest thing is to not just automatically follow the should and the supposed to and the rule that you have been handed, but to pause and make a conscious decision. Ask yourself if it's worth it. Dive in deeper. Understand the rules that you are handed, the rules that you're following, because only good things will come from that work and from taking a pause to decide what you really want to do next. So that's the first thing around intuition, of like what can get in the way of following your intuition is the rules that you are handed, that you're following, that guide you away from your intuition. The second one is a little bit more basic, which is not even knowing what your intuition is telling you in the first place. And this is so common. This is so common because we generally in our culture, everyone's a little different, but generally in our culture are not taught to follow our intuitions, even to listen to them or tell them, notice what our bodies and our intuitions are telling us. And in particular, like in Western culture, we highly, highly value what's happening in our brains above what's happening in the rest of our bodies. So we value logic over heart. We value mind and what's happening in our brain and logical sequential thought processes over like a feeling in our bodies or the wisdom and the guidance of your bodies. And there's nothing wrong with logic, but it's not like a 90-10 proposition where we're 90% logic and 10% body. In my opinion, it should be more balanced. Maybe even leaning more towards the body, the intuitive side, because that's going to give you the answers that you need. So what do you do? What do you do if you're cut off from that intuition and you don't even know what it is telling you? I have a little hack for you. And I don't love the word hack, but this kind of actually works. This is a hack. It's something that you can do even if you feel disconnected from your intuition, even if you feel disconnected from your body. This is something you can do when you need to make a decision and you aren't sure what to do, or even if you are feeling that should or the supposed to, or you're just not feeling that intuitive hit in any way. Here's what you can do to hack your way into your own intuition. We're going to use a simple example here of just kind of a yes or no, yes or no. So let's go back to that job offer one. You've been tapped on the shoulder to take this next job at your company, and you aren't sure. We'll give the example of you aren't sure yet. So what I want you to do is essentially you fast forward yourself into the future, having said yes to the job, and then really sit with that. See yourself in the job. See yourself saying yes to your manager, whoever the manager of that role is. See yourself doing the work. And then notice what happens in your body. Just notice it with total curiosity. What's the feeling that's coming up? What's happening in your body? All those things. Then take a breath, and then fast forward yourself to saying no, to having the conversation where you say no, to staying in your job, to declining that offer, and notice how that feels in your body. And what are the differences between the two? Typically, when your intuition is pulling you somewhere, when it's a yes from an intuitive standpoint, your answer will feel like a yes answer. Yes, meaning intuition, good. Follow that answer will feel like expansiveness or relief or openness or excitement. And there might be some fear laced in there, especially if it's a big thing that you are maybe saying yes to. That's exciting, but also scary. So there can be some fear in there, but is it fear combined with the expansiveness? That is a yes from an intuition standpoint. A no from an intuition standpoint is when your body contracts. I often get a pit in my stomach or kind of a nervous feeling in my torso as a whole. And that's a no. That's an intuitive no. And for you, these feelings might shift a little. They might be a little bit different from what I'm describing. So notice for yourself. Notice for yourself when you fast forward into these two different scenarios of saying yes and saying no, how does your body feel in either one of those? And then you'll know what your intuition is telling you, because your body will guide the way. And this doesn't have to take long. This can take like 1 to 2 minutes, and that's it. And this can be a really useful tool from anything from tiny little decisions to huge decisions. And this really connecting in with your body is going to be a gateway back to your intuition in all forms. So this little hack of fast forwarding yourself, that's a fast forward gateway into feeling what your body is, what it's telling you. And also in reality, your body's giving you signals all the time. So once you start practicing, you'll start noticing and being like, oh yeah, my body's telling me this is a yes. My body's telling me this is a no. My body's telling me I should move in this direction. My body's telling me to back away from this other direction. And I think back to when I was deciding what to do in my corporate job before I left it to start my business. What prompted that was that my job changed in a way that I was not going to like. And that was very clear. I had no problem knowing my intuition on that one. It was very clear that I did not want this new opportunity. And I didn't say anything. In the moment, I just said yes. But I knew something was going to have to change. So I had a lot of potential options out there. So starting a business was one. Quitting or applying for other corporate jobs and then quitting and moving to another company was another option. Staying and saying nothing was an option and just doing the job that was handed to me, even though I knew I was going to hate it. Or another option was talking to my manager about, how long could I do this on a temporary basis, or telling her at least, I don't like this. What are other options? So having a conversation about that. So there's at least 4 options that were all on the table. And everything in my body told me, you can't just ignore this, Heather. You can't ignore it. Like, it will be detrimental to your soul and your well-being to just stay in this job on a long-term basis. That was so clear to me that it quickly became not an option on the table, like almost immediately. But from there, then, as I started to explore different avenues, and I explored them in a very logical way as well as an intuitive way. I did research. I used the book Designing Your Life. I talked to other people that were out there. So this wasn't all just inside my body. I was gathering information as well. But as I was gathering that information, as I was learning more, then I could listen to my body and say, as I'm learning, where am I being pulled? What is my body telling me? What is my intuition telling me? And where is it guiding me to go? And then it became so obvious as I followed down this path, both gathering information and listening to my intuition, that starting a business was without a doubt the right decision. A terrifying one. Like, don't get me wrong. When I talked about that fear laced with expansion, it was very real and huge. But the expansion and the excitement and the possibility and the creativity and the ideas and just everything that came to me was telling me that this was the right way to go. And I got to listen to that and start to listen to that intuition as it pulled me forward and notice what was happening in my body. So the key here is to listen. Listen to what your body's telling you. Listen to what your intuition is telling you, which for me, those things are really intertwined. Occasionally I get an intuitive hit or feeling that feels just kind of more like it came from the beyond as opposed to a very distinct body feeling. But oftentimes they are just intricately intertwined, where my body and my intuition are almost the exact same thing, or my intuition shows up as a feeling in my body. So start listening to that. Start listening to your body, and you will automatically start listening to your intuition. And this is all of this is a journey and a practice. For years, I felt pretty disconnected from my intuition. I think I didn't slow down enough to even feel it or to question it. And there was, I always had a lot of questions, but I didn't really have answers. So it was like my intuition was hovering there, but I didn't pay enough attention to it. Wasn't connected in enough with my body that I could really listen to it and trust it and follow it. And it's been a practice over the last several years to get more tapped into that. And I still don't follow it all the time. I mean, even with the Scotland example, I was feeling the feelings, but I wasn't listening to it enough to really articulate, oh, wait, maybe I should reconsider. Maybe all of these feelings are telling me that I should make a different decision, that just because I've committed already doesn't mean I can't at least have a conversation with my friend. And she was just more tapped into that and more willing, more able to articulate her intuition. So like, this is something I'm still practicing. And even today, in two small ways, as I was sitting down to record this podcast, I thought, oh my gosh, just today, I've had two examples where I did and did not listen to my intuition in making decisions. And on the first side, so on the where I did listen to it, was about an hour or an hour and a half ago. I sat down to record this podcast, and everything in my body was like, go for a walk. Like, I was tired. My brain felt a little muddled. The sun was kind of starting to come out. It has been raining a ridiculous amount here in Colorado. Like, we are sunshine 300 days a year, kind of sun state. And that has not been happening for a long time. It's been raining a ton, and the rain had stopped, and everything in me was like, go outside, go take a walk, and then come back and record this podcast. And I can tell you, this podcast is a lot better because I listened to that intuition. I went out for like half an hour. It felt great. I cleared my head. I moved my body. Everything about it was good. And even within that, I paused for a moment before making that decision, because I was like, oh no, like, I'm here, I'm sitting down, I'm ready to do this. But I was feeling that pull. My body was like, no, go outside. And I'm so glad that I followed that little tiny bit of intuition that told me that. And then when I was out on the walk, I was kind of laughing to myself because I thought, how hypocritical would it be if I didn't follow my intuition when I was sitting down to record a podcast about making decisions on your intuition and following your intuition. Would have been pretty hypocritical. So glad I did not follow that, but know that it is still a practice for me. And I'm checking back in with myself and learning. And then the other decision that I made today that was not following my intuition, kind of a silly one, but very real. I was at Costco today, and many months, maybe even years ago, I stopped buying the rotisserie chickens because they're just super salty and they always made me crazy thirsty and just all of these things. And I was like, and they're also kind of just weirdly big. And I'm like, what are we doing to those chickens to make them that plump? I used to work for a food company. Like I know enough and I'm not scared of these things. And also I'm like, maybe something's going on with those chickens. I'm not saying they're toxic or anything like that. I don't want anyone to email me and tell me, well, if anyone has actual information, I'm happy to hear it. But anyway, I digress. Let's come back. I knew I had stopped eating these rotisserie chickens specifically from Costco for a reason. And today I was at Costco and I was like, a rotisserie chicken sounds really good. And it sounds really easy. And all I'd have to do is pick one up and then cut it off of the chicken and make a little salad. And I have my lunch. Sounds easy, sounds delicious, sounds all the things. And my body was sitting there whispering me, telling me, you're not going to feel that great if you eat the rotisserie chicken. You shouldn't do this. But did I listen to that whispering voice telling me you're not going to feel good? No. Today, I bought the rotisserie chicken and I was like, it'll be fine. It's just some chicken. And then I ate the rotisserie chicken and I got a headache and I was unbelievably thirsty. Like I even during this podcast, I've sipped water, which I don't normally do. I had like 3 glasses of water and a cup of tea. I had to take ibuprofen. I had a caffeinated tea and my whole head and body just felt off. I felt bloated. And I was like, that's right, Heather. This is why you stopped eating the Costco rotisserie chickens. And even in the moment of making the decision, my body was whispering to me like, don't do it, Heather. Don't do it. You're not going to feel good. And I ignored it and I didn't feel good. And it was a reminder to me to follow that voice in my body, in my intuition for the smallest of decisions, like whether or not to buy a rotisserie chicken from Costco, or medium-sized ones like, should I go to Scotland? Should I reconsider this trip? And the really big ones like, should you move? Should you take that job? Should you quit your job and start a business? Should you have kids or not have kids? What should you do in the relationship that you're in, whether that's a dating, romantic relationship, whether that's a friendship or parental relationship? I mean, all of these things. Your body and your intuition is giving you information all the time. And it's giving you really good, valuable information all the time. It's just that the rules get in the way of following it and listening to it and trusting it. And our lack of practice and even noticing it in the first place, which also goes back to the rules and what is valued in our culture. So you get to practice as well. You get to practice in the little, the medium, and the really big situations. To come back to your body, come back to your intuition. Because in my experience, it's guiding you in the right way. It's guiding you towards goodness, and it's guiding you away from the things that are not your path. It's guiding you in the direction of you. And I talk about this in both my first book, An Overachiever's Guide to Breaking the Rules. There's a whole part there on reconnecting to your body. And then in my next book, in Grounded Wildness, there's a chapter called Listening to Your Knowing, even when it doesn't make sense on paper. So if you're interested in either of those, you can go out and grab An Overachiever's Guide to Breaking the Rules now, or pre-sale still going on, or sale later on, depending on when you listen to this for Grounded Wildness. Because this is a part of Grounded Wildness, is listening to your body, listening to your intuition, and really following that, separate from the shoulds and the supposed tos, and getting into practice with that and listening. letting your intuition guide you on your path, not down someone else's path, not down the path of should and supposed to, but what is healthy, well, good, freeing, and most importantly, yours, your path. Bye.